News Update Coronavirus April 14, 2020. Note, this is a collaborative video made between Travel for All Vantage and Knowledge of Coronavirus channel. Please respectfully welcome everyone. The following is the remarkable news most on April 14 as follows. COVID-19 has infected more than 1.9 million people and killed at least 119,000 worldwide, according to Johns Hopkins University. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, on April 14, declared that New York had gone through the worst period of the pandemic and began to consider the gradual easing of social divestment measures to reopen the economy. 2. The US CDC director says we are nearing a peak right now when the infection topped 582,000, including more than 23,000 deaths. The CDC report says people in 4 major cities are listening to orders at home, according to a report issued by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on Monday. Although there are early signs that social isolation has helped slow the spread of coronavirus, experts warn that if people do not continue to follow orders, the virus may increase again in some areas. The CDC report looked at data in New York City, Seattle, New Orleans, and San Francisco, 4 cities with significant numbers of coronavirus patients early in the outbreak that forced them to stay home in mid to late March. 3. Indian news. The restriction will continue in India until May 3, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said in television of this country. 4. UK coronavirus death toll surpasses 12,000. At least 12,107 people have died from coronavirus in the UK's hospitals, according to the latest figures from the Department of Health and Social Care. Remember that this number only includes deaths in hospitals. These figures do not include people in nursing homes or other places. Other figures, published by the UK's Office of National Statistics today, show that the actual number of deaths is significantly higher than that of the Ministry of Health and Social Care, because there may be a delay in the record of a number of deaths. 5. Brazil news. Coronavirus fears grow for Brazil's indigenous groups. Concerns are growing that coronavirus could wreak havoc on native communities of Brazil after the death of a teenage boy in the Amazon region. The first indigenous person to test positive for COVID-19 was a 20-year-old woman of the Cachama people in Amazonas state. Many villages have responded to the crisis by barring access to outsiders and encouraging villagers to avoid communal gatherings. 6. China is giving cash to car buyers to revive sales crushed by the pandemic. In a normal year, China sold more than 6 million new cars. This year, the figure is nearly 3.7 million, and now the government is giving cash to help the world's largest auto market regain post-coronavirus performance. Auto sales fell 42% in the first quarter of 2020 compared to last year, according to data released last weekend by the China Automobile Manufacturers Association, CAAM. The automobile industry plays an important role in the Chinese economy. More than 40 million people in the country rely on this field to find jobs, directly or indirectly. The industry generates more than $1 trillion in revenue annually, about 10% of China's production. Other Chinese news. The number of new infections in China has decreased. The National Health Commission of China on April 14 announced the record of 89 new infections in the country on April 13. So this data shows a slight decrease compared to 108 cases of the previous day, and no, there are deaths. Among new cases, there are 86 cases returning from abroad. 3 cases were domestic. China is beginning to tighten its border with Russia after discovering dozens of new cases in Heilongjiang province bordering Russia. Previously, Beijing mainly focused on airports to control and prevent the second outbreak in the country. 7. News of France. French President Emmanuel Macron on April 13 announced that nationwide blockade measures scheduled to expire on April 14 will be extended until May 11. Schools and shops will gradually reopen on May 11, Mr. Macron said. But restaurants, hotels, cafes and cinemas will have to close longer, while people from non-European countries will continue to be denied entry until further notice. According to Mr. Macron, after 11 May the government will conduct testing of all people with symptoms of coronavirus infection in parallel with the distribution of masks for all people. 8. News of Germany. The number of infections in Germany dropped for the fourth day in a row. The Robert Koch Institute reported an increase of 2,082 cases in Germany on April 14, marking the fourth consecutive day the number of new cases decreases in the country. In addition, Germany also has an additional 170 patients who died of COVID-19. To date, Germany has recorded 125,098 infections and 2,969 deaths. 9. Greek news. Greece declared victory over the coronavirus pandemic. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis on April 13 praised the country's anti-COVID-19 efforts, but he also warned not to be complacent. The Greek Prime Minister's worries are valid as the country is preparing to enter the Orthodox Resurrection Day, a time when hundreds of thousands are out for family gatherings. Greece recorded 30 new infections on April 13, bringing the total number of new infections in the country to 2,145 people, including 99 dead. 10. Other information about the United States. South Dakota was one of the last states in the United States to refrain from issuing orders to force people to stay home against the COVID-19 epidemic, and the result could become one of the most complicated outbreaks. In total, South Dakota currently has 868 cases of COVID-19 infection and 6 deaths. A relatively large number in the state has 900,000 people, according to the Washington Post. South Dakota has become one of the largest hotspots in the U.S., with an outbreak of up to 300 people infected at the pork processing and processing factory. With a number of infections continuing to rise sharply, the company was temporarily closed from April 12, affecting food supplies across the United States. 11. Japanese news. The Japanese health minister on April 14 reported the number of COVID-19 infections in Japan doubled since the East Asian national government declared a state of emergency on the April 7 disease. The number of patients infected with COVID-19 has doubled in Tokyo. 7 cities and provinces declared a state of emergency and nationwide. The Japan Times quoted Katsuna Yukado, the Minister of Health of Japan, as saying in a press conference after the cabinet meeting. Mr. Kato points out that 70% of the total cases of April 7 to April 13 occurred in 7 provinces, declared to be in a state of emergency, including 2 cities, Tokyo, Saitama, and 5 provinces, Chiba, Kanagawa, Osaka, Hyogo, and Fukuoka. On the other hand, dozens of prostitutes were infected with COVID-19 in a red light district in Tokyo, Japan, raising concerns that these people may have spread the virus to hundreds of others. 12. Russia news. Last week, on March 25, President Vladimir Putin delivered an online speech to the entire Russian people about the COVID pandemic. This is the first time the Russian president has spoken after a month has passed. Opening the speech, Mr. Putin confirmed that he would postpone the vote to change the constitution, which is expected to take place on April 22. Our newsletter is now over. Thank you for always watching and supporting our videos. Knowledge of Coronavirus, Channel and Travel for All Fantage respectfully, and see you in the next video.